That's what I need. I need a pen. That's what I want. Clearly badasses, welcome to the show. Oh, L joined. Eric John, welcome. Dina Wells has joined the show. Welcome, everybody. We're just getting started. Come on in. Say hello. Let me know in the comments that you're live. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Two Healing Minds, welcome. Dina Wells, welcome. Hope everyone's doing good today. I'm trying to get some lighting going. It is September 11th, which is 9/11, in remembrance of what had happened on that fateful morning. I'm going to get into it. Dearborn, Michigan, in the house. So, that's basically where AJ is from. My business partner and co-host of The Art of Charm is from Dearborn as well. He went to Michigan. Yes. I can't remember the little town in Michigan, but it was close to Dearborn. Hippie the Hills. What is up, buddy? My favorite buddy from India. How are things going? All right. So if you're tuning in, I am restreaming. So if you're on Periscope or YouTube, be sure to shoot me a comment. That's how I know that you guys are there. And if you're watching an archive of this show, please smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, share it, do all that great stuff, because every time that you engage in our content by hitting the like or subscribing, that helps the algorithm know that, hey, this stuff's good. People like it. Let's put it in more people's faces. So it helps. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Glad that you guys are all in. Godspeed EDC, welcome. I am King 510, welcome. All right. So I said I would start with some COVID-19 updates before I get into remembrance. All right. Here's the COVID-19 updates in case any of you have been wondering. For 6 months, we've been under siege. For 6 months, the world has been under siege from an epidemic, a pandemic called COVID-19. And exactly after 6 months, we still don't know anything at all. JM, welcome. Good to see you, buddy. We don't know if masks work. We don't know what meds work. We don't have readily available therapeutics for everybody. We have squabbling and arguments over the lockdown procedures. Apparently, we did it wrong. Everyone else did it right. Unless you're politically polarized, then you could hypothetically could have done it other ways, and it would have been perfect, and everything would have been fine, and no one would have died, and we would all be living wonderful lives. But no, we did it all wrong. That's where we are. Anyway, so those are the COVID-19 updates. Yeah, that's where we are. It's just upsetting after 6 months of that there's still so much squabbling. But that should tell you something realistic about where we're at and what's going on. Yeah. Everything's politicized. It's an election year. Let's move that to the side. What is difficult to digest, and this leads into it being 9/11 and the remembrance. So let's go to that. Is that all of the squabbling, all of our institutions that we look to in a time of crisis have failed. So regardless of what you believe or don't believe, or how it should have been handled and how it shouldn't have been handled, the one update that I can feel good about is that no one knows shit, and everyone's felt. Limza says, wear a mask, bro. Yeah, wear a mask. That'll fix everything. So that's the update. And that's what and it's hurtful. And I will tell you why. Because of all the institutions that have failed in this moment, and when I say failed, I mean failed spectacularly. Failed that they couldn't cover up an agenda. Failed that they don't have the right science. Failed that to give a solid message. Failed in that their need and desire and job to allow us to feel better about a situation has failed. So that's the update. Klaus Fowler says, hello, Johnny. Well, hello to you, buddy. I appreciate that. And Drew, Johnny, I hope all well is in Sin City. Well, I'll tell you, Drew, it actually isn't fine in Sin City. And I'll tell you what happened. So, when you move into a new place, you realize that there's like some issues going on. And I've had a toilet was clogged. I fixed that. So the air conditioning was a little bit messed up, so I fixed that. But here's what happened yesterday. My sink in the kitchen has finally got to a place where it is completely clogged. Me being the man that I am, decided that no clog in the sink is going to make me call a plumber. I can fix this. All I need is a YouTube video and a hammer and some Drano, and I got this. That's all you need. That's all you need in this world is a YouTube video, a hammer, and some other stuff, and you're good to go. So I watched the YouTube video. I went under the sink. I started ripping stuff apart. And let me just say that I had to call a plumber. Yes, and I'm waiting. Drew says the man's guide to fixing stuff. And now I am waiting for them to call me back and book an appointment because I have made the situation that much worse. So, YouTube video, hammer, some miscellaneous tools. That was not going to allow me to fix the plumbing. But I don't feel bad about it. I feel good about it because at least I went under there and I started ripping stuff apart. At least I tried. I didn't just throw my hands up like a child and say, please somebody come fix this. At least I tried. I got dirty. I got water everywhere. I got grime everywhere. I got gunk everywhere. I got into it. I gave it a solid effort. I was in there for at least a good 2 hours, banging on stuff, twisting on stuff, and it's a mess. It is a mess. When that plumber comes today, I will feel good knowing, yeah, bro, I gave it my all. You and me, we're kindred spirits. A good thing somebody with some knowledge has come over here to give me a hand because I was ripping stuff apart and realized it was a little bit too big of a job for me to do myself. So I'm not one of those sissy musicians who's just going to throw his hands up and go, call a plumber. No, man, I got in there. I gave it my all. And this is the thing. I'm not afraid to make a mess into a bigger mess. I got that handled. Christina over in YouTube or Insta says she's laughing at me. At least I tried. Yeah, at least I tried. Yeah, at least I tried. Those soft Sammy Hagar hands. Well, actuality, I don't know if you can see that I totally did a number on myself. I ripped up my hands. I got this Drano pustule stuff all over them. I mean, I woke up hurting, sore. My hands are all messed up. I gave it a college effort, gentlemen. And that's what matters. I'm okay to come to the conclusion that I'm not qualified to do work that takes years to understand. I figured some simple tool knowledge and a YouTube video, and I would be able to handle this. But it was a job a little bit too big for me. So that's where that's that's where that's at. Thank you guys for letting me know that you appreciate that. I hope you enjoy the laugh about that. I was pretty upset last night that I couldn't figure it out, and I got down on myself. I woke up this morning, I saw the mess that I made, and I've got to the conclusion, like anything else in life, hey, at least I tried. All right, I'm not completely, utterly helpless there. So I appreciate that. Thank you guys. All right. So moving into 9/11 remembrance, and this is what I wanted to tie in with COVID. Because in 2001, America was a much different place. Now, was the events of 9/11 that much, that powerful, that monumentous, that a lot of the problems that we're experiencing today, were they due to how we handled 9/11? I don't know. In fact, I wasn't as politically active as I was in 2001. And I will tell you, in 2001, on the day of 9/11, I was waiting for our ride to go to the airport because I was going on my first European tour. So you can imagine, not only was I not politically active, I was waiting on a tour. We stayed up all night drinking. In fact, that's what I did most nights, was stay up all night drinking. I was going on tour. We were at the band house. We were waiting for our car. Man, what a hair day. We were waiting for our car to come pick us up to go. We were 20 minutes from going, drinking some coffee, 20 minutes from our car picking us up, when we turned on the television and saw that Tower 1 had been struck by a plane. And we really weren't quite sure what to make of that. Now, think about that visual. Who here remembers that visual, the first realization of what was going on? So I believe somebody called us and said, turn on the television. We turned it on, and we saw the tower and the smoke coming out of it. And we were just confused when the other tower was hit. And it was at that moment that I had, to use a line from Pulp Fiction, what alcoholics called a moment of clarity, that I had snapped out of my hangover to realize that don't look like I was going to Europe, at least certainly today, possibly not anytime soon, and had to watch that. And we've played New York. We've certainly had a lot of people that we knew in New York. Christina over in Instagram says, I think we all remember what we were doing when we saw the news on television. Well, what were you doing, Christina? Do you remember? If what were you, post in the comments where you were. What were you doing? So for me, hangover, morning coffee, packing, waiting for my ride to go to Europe to begin the European tour. And we were supposed to play in a few days, and I believe my dad was already in Europe because he was going to make the first show. So we hadn't seen each other in quite a while, and he was going to Europe to the first show was at the Paradiso in Amsterdam, I believe. And that was the first show. And I never did get to play the Paradiso. Eric John says, I was a sophomore in high school and just got my learner's permit. So you had just that morning, you had just got your learner's permit and you were celebrating and you saw that. So it is certainly difficult when I think about that. So we were supposed to play, the first show was at the Paradiso. We realized that we weren't going. And then we're hearing about the Pentagon. And then, of course, the fourth plane, is it the fourth, went down in Westmoreland County in Ligonier area of Western Pennsylvania. And I believe that was supposed to be going to the White House. At least that's what the reports were. Now, that's significant to me because I grew up in Western Pennsylvania and I've certainly been through those foothills of Appalachia. And so I know that the area. And so that was quite significant because that was a remote area that really no one knows about unless you are from there. So that was also going. Now, America was quite a different time back then. I mean, the heroicism of our first responders, police, firemen, the journalists, the people who were on the ground. For days, we watched the footage of people covered in ash with no giving up their own well-being with reckless abandon in order to help other human beings that they did not know of. And the race, color, social economic backgrounds, sexual orientation, gender, none of this insanity that is ripping apart our social fabric today was anywhere involved. It was not on. What was on everybody's mind was there are human beings in these buildings, and these buildings are on fire. And because it was human beings stuck in burning buildings, people acted in a courageous manner that we're just not seeing right now. And I was also incredibly upset with de Blasio that he was not interested in lighting up the remembrance lights of 9/11 for whatever agenda pushing, signaling, messaging, or his own personal reasoning during this pandemic. I find incredibly appalling when the remembrance of this situation and the courageous people who saved lives, who risked their own life for others that they did not know because they were New Yorkers, because they were American. It is important to remember such tragedy because it is the remembrance in such tragedy that puts perspective on what's going on now. And when I was growing up, the media and the culture that I grew up in was one about togetherness, about celebrating life, being an American, and about humanity. And now I'm supposed to believe that is all changed. I'm 46 years old. And for the rest of everyone out there listening who has some years under their belt, remember when we all lived in a racially harmonious time. Not to say that we didn't have our troubles. It wasn't all unicorns and rainbows, but we tried. We were much better along. And then you just can't tell me that the reason being is orange man bad. Now, so 2001, September 11th, I turned on the television upon drinking my coffee to go to the airport for my first European tour, to be snapped out of my hangover, to see the horrifying sights of what was going on. Now, that was awful. That was terrible. But I didn't live in New York. I was living in North Carolina. And we were, as I said, we were flying out to Europe. Now, in 2007, 6 years later, I moved to New York City. And not only did I move to New York City, I lived downtown. We moved to Wall Street. We moved to 15 Broad to start the Art of Charm, to start the very company that you are engaged with right now. And I saw that memorial. And when I moved to New York City, I moved in New York City in September, late September 2007. And the lights of the memorial were bright and recognizable. And in my first night in New York City, lost, uptown, drunk, 3, 4 in the morning, I walked all the way back downtown because I didn't have any money and I was excited about being in New York and it seemed safe. And I walked home. And the only reason, and I have an awful, horrible sense of direction. And the only way, the only direction, signal that I had to walk home back to Wall Street, to know where I was in my drunken stupor, was to look up and to see those lights and realize that I was north and that I would follow those lights home back downtown to the financial district. And I was there for 2 years in New York City. And I had met a lot of people who had friends in those towers. We lived downtown. I had met people who lived downtown through that situation. And I heard all about it. It still weighed heavily on a lot of people's minds. And you don't just have a snapshot. For those people, they don't have a snapshot of where they were and to watch it on the television. They have an imprinted emotional tie to a series of events in a period of time that will always be marred with tragedy and trauma. And they saw the heroism and the courageousness and the bravery of everyone who acted in the interest of others' well-being through all of that. So when you look at New York today, considering what an incredible city it once was, who in the face of tragedy, New Yorkers have, for them, as a large proportion of that population in New York City, saw New York and saw America in the same light, where they were able to push to the side any sort of petty squabbling, because they had a pride in themselves and other New Yorkers of who they were and what they've been through and how it tied them together. And that is New York. And that's how I always want to view New York. And that's how I'm always going to view New York. I'm not going to view New York the way it is now. And I hope that we're able to pull our collective heads out of our asses. Now, I know that's quite difficult when we are going through a global pandemic and we've realized that our institutions who are supposed to protect us, help us, and work with us during troubled times can't get their act together. When we know that in the past, they have. So this idea that America has always been divided and this was always bubbling underneath is a facade, is a lie. Because I have enough life experience to know that it wasn't always like that. We didn't always think this way, and we weren't always squabbling. We have a lot of things that are different in today's world, but what isn't different is we haven't changed species. We haven't evolved to such a place that we've forgot where we've come from. As much as things around us evolved, human beings evolve much slower. Can culture speed up some of that? Sure. Has culture sped up? Sure. But we haven't. Let's keep that in mind today. And I'll go through the comments here. I want to hear where you guys were. Joe Perks says, I was homesick that day. Family called when the first plane hit. So I was watching the news when the second hit. Not that we knew it was a plane, not even the anchors. Yeah, no one knew what was going on, but we certainly did when that second plane hit. Drew Furstenberger over in YouTube says, I was early in my career in mortgage collections and was calling a borrower after I ID'd myself. He said, how the F could you be calling me at a time like this? Was completely unaware of that moment. Wow. Yeah, I could imagine, Drew. I'm sorry to hear that. It is kind of funny though. Yeah. Well, you're just doing your job. It's kind of difficult. Klaus over on YouTube says 9/11 triggered my awakening. Well, it certainly didn't for me, Klaus. I was a musician back then and still doing that. Let's go over to Instagram here. Christina says that she was sitting on the floor in front of the television after dinner watching the news. More or less a week before, I was in New York City coming back from the holidays. Wow, Christina. I'm sure, as an Italian who had the opportunity to visit one of the greatest cities in the world, New York City. Did you go to Little Italy while you were there as well? I'm sure that was shocking and quite sad, to say the least, when you were probably still on your, what I call your American visit high. When I travel, I'm usually in a wonderland of marvel when I've traveled to such places. And New York City is certainly one of those, certainly at that time, that would put you in a place of marveling the wonderful city that it was. All right. Klaus said, yeah, the report, let's just say the report thereafter. Yeah, buddy, I hear you. All right. So, guys, thank you very much for tuning in today. I got to go. I got a million things to do. Remember, 9/11, keep your heads up. And remember, we have not evolved from which we had come from. Remember your humanity and remember others. I know it's incredibly difficult today that our institutions have added to a lot of this confusion. I would like to say they've muddied the waters for their own political agendas. And you and I, an animal back here, were caught in the middle of it. And the only thing that we can do, the most important thing that we can do, is focus on what we need to be doing and try to help out your neighbor where you can. That's most important. We haven't evolved in 2,000 years, says Klaus over in YouTube. Certainly, I would have to agree with that on a scientific level. However, I will say this, Klaus, our cognitive processes have certainly evolved in 2,000 years through culture and philosophy and scientific discovery. But that certainly doesn't mean that our human evolution and humanity has evolved beyond the point of into another species. My friend, you are absolutely correct. All right, I gotta go. I got a million things to do. Everybody, be awesome this weekend, and I will see you Monday morning, 8:30 a.m. Cheers.